For thousands of years, people blamed spirits for the invasion of thought. Today, the invaders have addresses, logos, and user interfaces. The whisper has become a notification sound. The battlefield has moved from temples and deserts into the circuitry of the global network. When the printing press appeared, ideas could finally travel faster than armies. By the 20th century, nations learned that stories could conquer more efficiently than swords. Propaganda became a science. Its architects, Lippmann, Bernays, Goebbels, studied the same human impulses the mystics once warned about: fear, belonging, and the need for certainty. Posters, radio broadcasts, and films no longer informed. They engineered consent. Psychologists discovered that repetition, imagery, and authority could anchor beliefs so deeply that logic could no longer dislodge them. Once the pattern was known, every power, from corporations to cults, used it. Commercial advertising took propaganda's lessons and wrapped them in smiles. Instead of threatening damnation, it promised salvation through consumption. Colors, jingles, and slogans bypass reason and go straight to the limbic system. Each purchase delivers a dopamine spark, small, fleeting, addictive. Over time, the citizen becomes a consumer whose values and identity are shaped by what can be sold. The invisible puppeteers no longer need chains. They need a brand. Television expanded the trance. A single narrative could bathe millions of minds in synchronized emotion. News cycles began to reward outrage. Entertainment blurred with information. When every second of airtime must hold attention, fear and scandal become currency. This logic migrated to the internet, where algorithms now refine it with mathematical precision. The digital feed learns what arouses you: anger, desire, envy, and serves more of it. In doing so, it reshapes perception itself. Each user lives inside a custom-built echo chamber where belief feels absolute. It is not possession by spirits, but by data models. The algorithm is not malevolent, it is indifferent. Its only commandment is engagement. Yet its effect is identical to that of any ancient deceiver. It isolates, divides, and feeds on attention. Every scroll, like every prayer, strengthens the entity that receives it. You are no longer the customer. You are the resource. The true product is your focus. The new machinery does not merely watch, it anticipates. Cameras, sensors, and online footprints assemble profiles detailed enough to predict mood, preference, even political leaning. The more accurately a system can forecast behavior, the more easily it can guide it. Prediction becomes preemption. Choice becomes choreography. Freedom still exists, but within boundaries drawn by code. When ancient priests read omens to control the masses, they claimed insight into fate. Today, data analysts do the same with statistics. Both practices turn uncertainty into obedience. Nations learn to weaponize the digital mind. Cyber propaganda farms, deepfakes, and bot networks flood timelines with manufactured emotion. Truth drowns not in lies, but in excess. When every fact has a counterfact, the public retreats into tribes, and reason collapses. In this noise, manipulation hides perfectly. The mind, fatigued by contradiction, surrenders to whatever feels safe. Designers know that variable rewards, the same mechanism that drives slot machines, keep users hooked. Every like, every new follower, every random viral spike is a small uncertainty that triggers the brain's reward circuit. We scroll not for pleasure, but for possibility. This intermittent reinforcement is the modern equivalent of the sorcerer's charm, a loop that consumes willpower. Hours vanish. Identity diffuses into metrics. The ancients feared possession by spirits. Today we call it screen time. Words still cast the strongest spells. Framing, euphemism, and slogan turn complex realities into reflexes. Collateral damage, war on terror, customer journey, phrases that anesthetize empathy and replace thought with script. Social media amplifies this through hashtags and memes, compressed symbols that carry emotional charge but little reasoning. The medium trains us to react, not reflect. Whoever controls vocabulary controls imagination. In myth, gods demanded worship. In modernity, corporations seek engagement. Their temples are shopping malls and digital ecosystems. Their priests are influencers. Their hymns are jingles. Each collects belief in the form of loyalty data. They promise happiness but deliver dependence. The ritual is subtle, tap by repeat. Every gesture feeds the machinery that studies and sells you back to yourself. Yet awareness spreads. Documentaries, whistleblowers, psychologists, and technologists expose the mechanisms of control. Digital minimalism, critical thinking, media literacy. These are today's protective rights. The same technology that manipulates can also illuminate when used consciously. The tool is neutral. The intent defines its morality. To reclaim the mind is to reclaim attention. Simple acts, turning off notifications, taking deliberate pauses, questioning emotional reactions, break the cycle. Mindfulness interrupts the algorithmic trance the way ancient chants interrupted obsession. Each moment of unhooked awareness weakens the machinery's hold. The modern puppeteers do not lurk in shadows. They stand in boardrooms and behind code. Their strings are invisible because we volunteer to hold them. But a mind that knows it is being played can learn the melody, cut the strings, and walk off stage. The war for consciousness has not ended. It has only gone wireless. In ancient times, control was seen as sorcery. Today, it is neuroscience. The symbols have changed, from pentagrams to brain scans, but the purpose remains identical: to discover how thought begins and how it can be steered before we are aware of it. The human brain is not a passive receiver of reality. It is a predictor. Every moment, billions of neurons guess what comes next, filling the gaps between what is seen and what is expected. This mechanism saves energy, but it also makes the mind vulnerable. Whoever can shape expectation can shape perception itself. Advertisers, politicians, cult leaders, and propagandists all exploit this. By repeating a message until it feels familiar, they trick the brain into treating fiction as fact. The mind confuses prediction with proof. Fear is the primal switch of human behavior. The amygdala, buried deep within the brain, ignites before logic awakens. When fear dominates, reason retreats. Survival instincts take the throne. Evil, or any manipulator, knows this well. Whether it's a tyrant threatening invasion, a scammer selling safety, or an ideology warning of outsiders, fear focuses attention on one narrow path: obedience. In neurological terms, fear hijacks attention, and attention is the gatekeeper of reality. Every pleasure, from laughter to victory, runs through the same chemical, dopamine. It is the signal of anticipation, not satisfaction. This tiny molecule motivates us to seek, to chase, to continue. Evil systems use it like a leash. Social media, slot machines, and even news notifications exploit the dopamine loop. They promise reward, but deliver only potential. You keep scrolling not because you find joy, but because the next scroll might bring it. This is not a glitch, it's a design. Within every brain, a quiet empathy network reflects what it witnesses. When we see someone laugh, cry, or rage, our neurons imitate their state. This is how emotion spreads faster than thought. It is why crowds move as one body, why mobs ignite, why propaganda films once held nations in trance. Evil in its most clinical form understands mimicry. It knows that one visible act of cruelty can seed 1,000 invisible ones through imitation. Contagion becomes control. Beneath conscious thought lies a sea of stored emotion and habit. It is the realm where suggestion thrives. Hypnosis, trauma, repetition, all access this silent reservoir. While the rational mind argues, the subconscious absorbs. Modern mind control rarely needs brute force. It uses symbols, tone, and rhythm to bypass logic entirely. Music can calm or incite. Lighting can soften defenses. Repetition can implant belief. The subconscious cannot tell fiction from reality. It simply records intensity. And whoever writes into that depth writes behavior. Humans are not rational. They are rationalizers. We see what we expect to see and dismiss what discomforts us. This is why disinformation succeeds. It aligns with pre-existing belief. Confirmation bias, anchoring, groupthink. These are the neural pathways of persuasion. Every algorithm, every political campaign, every marketing strategy exploits these same quirks. Evil does not need to break the mind. It merely needs to nudge it in the right direction. Control often begins with pain. When the psyche fractures through loss, violence, or shame, it becomes easier to mold. In psychological warfare and cult indoctrination alike, trauma is used to erase identity and install a new one. The victim clings to the very hand that hurt them because it also offers comfort. This is the cruel paradox of manipulation, breaking to rebuild in another's image. Sleep deprivation weakens the prefrontal cortex, the region of critical thought. In cults, military training, and interrogation, sleeplessness is used to dissolve resistance. The brain deprived of rest becomes suggestible, its boundaries between dream and waking blurred. Even in ordinary life, when exhausted by noise, work, or endless connectivity, we drift into a mild trance where any message, advertising, ideology, or fear can slip inside unnoticed. Neuroscience has shown that each time a memory is recalled, it becomes malleable before being stored again. This reconsolidation means memory is not fixed, it's rewritten slightly each time. Through repetition, false memories can replace true ones. This is the neural basis of propaganda. Change the record often enough, and history itself dissolves into myth. Evil forces no longer need to hide the truth, they simply teach us to forget it. Just as one brain can be conditioned, so can many. Social identity theory explains how people adopt the beliefs of their group to preserve belonging. The tribe becomes the self. In this state, dissent feels like betrayal, and obedience feels like virtue. This is the foundation of every mass movement and fanatic ideology. A collective mind can build civilizations or destroy them, depending on who conducts the orchestra. Neuromarketing, behavioral economics, and persuasive design are modern disciplines devoted to one goal: shaping decision. Every color on a screen, every vibration in a phone, every delay before a message appears has been tested on millions of brains. The result is a perfectly tuned psychological instrument, not evil by nature, but easily wielded by it. The same knowledge that could heal addiction or teach empathy can also enslave attention. Science, like magic, depends on intent. If control can reach this deep, is free will an illusion? Philosophers debate, neuroscientists measure. Experiments show that the brain begins actions milliseconds before conscious awareness. Choice, perhaps, is the art of approving what has already begun. Yet within that brief window lies dignity, the capacity to notice. Awareness may be the only freedom that cannot be programmed. The same brain that can be manipulated can also be trained to resist. Meditation rewires the attention network, strengthening control over impulse. Critical thinking retrains prediction, turning expectation into inquiry. Compassion heals mirrored neurons twisted by hate. And truth spoken, verified, shared rewrites memory toward coherence. The antidote to manipulation is not paranoia, but presence. Evil forces, whether imagined as spirits or algorithms, depend on ignorance of how the mind works. Once the machinery is seen, its power wanes. The enemy, then, is not darkness, it is blindness. And knowledge is the first light. Long before the language of neurons and data, humanity explained unseen influence through spirits, demons, and gods. Across civilizations, people sensed that thought was not always their own, that invisible forces could whisper, tempt, or command. What science now calls psychological influence, ancient cultures called possession. In the dawn of civilization, when storms struck or madness consumed a loved one, the cause was unseen. Babylonians named it the utaku, Egyptians blamed Set, and the Hebrews spoke of Sheddim. Each culture created its own vocabulary for interference. Evil was not abstract, it was personal, and to understand, it was to survive it. In this worldview, the human mind was a battlefield between light and shadow, divine order and chaos. Dreams, illness, anger, or sudden inspiration. All were signs that something other had entered the human domain. The Sumerians wrote of spirits who could seize the head or confuse the tongue. Priests, acting as early psychologists, prescribed rituals of cleansing, incense, salt, prayer to restore balance. To them, possession was not punishment, it was imbalance. The unseen and the seen were constantly intertwined. One wrong act, one impure thought could invite a destructive energy. Even then, people recognized a subtle truth. The mind, when weakened by guilt or fear, becomes porous. The Greeks called it daimonion, a personal spirit that could be benevolent or malevolent. Socrates famously claimed to hear his daimonion, a voice that warned him against certain actions. Later, when Christianity spread through Rome, these neutral spirits were recast as demons. A cosmic hierarchy was born: God above, humanity below, and countless invisible entities in between. Exorcism replaced dialogue. Fear replaced philosophy. Yet the concept persisted, the notion that thought could be invaded by something not entirely one's own. In India, the Vedic texts described asuras, forces of darkness that feed on ignorance. They did not possess through brute force, but through illusion, maya. To see through illusion was liberation. To fall for it was bondage. In China, Taoist masters spoke of Hun and Pe, the twin souls within every person. Disorder in these energies allowed foreign spirits to enter. Balance, the Tao, was the shield. Unlike the West, which externalized evil, the East often internalized it. The enemy was not outside, but within the imbalance of the self. By medieval Europe, the belief in possession reached its fevered height. Madness, illness, and rebellion were blamed on devils. Priests and inquisitors claimed the power to cast them out. The church became both savior and gatekeeper of the mind. Every whisper of doubt could be labeled heresy. Every deviation, a sign of corruption. In this climate, psychological disorders went unrecognized for centuries. Yet the rituals themselves, chanting, fasting, confession, often provided real catharsis, calming the afflicted through structure and belief. Even superstition at times healed. In Islamic tradition, the world is shared with jinn, beings of smokeless fire, unseen but aware. They too possess free will, capable of good or evil. Disturbances of mood or unexplained behavior were sometimes seen as their influence. Recitation, prayer, and cleanliness were considered protection. In essence, these were disciplines of mind and body, early forms of psychological hygiene. The pattern reappears. Spiritual control and mental control mirror each other. Where the mind is distracted or despairing, influence enters. Among tribal and shamanic cultures, possession was not always evil. A shaman could invite spirits for wisdom, healing, or courage. The difference lay in consent. A voluntary merging was divine inspiration. An involuntary one was attack. The ritual drum, the trance dance, the chant. These were methods to navigate unseen realms consciously. Modern neuroscience calls it altered states of consciousness. What they called spirits, we might call subconscious archetypes. The language differs, but the territory is the same. Every exorcism, every prayer, every ritual from Sumer to Salem relies on the same principle. Focus. By directing belief intensely toward light, fear, or purification, the participant reshapes inner perception. Faith becomes a neurological key. It reorganizes brain chemistry, replacing panic with certainty. Thus, whether the threat was demonic or psychological, the cure was always attention redirected, the oldest form of cognitive therapy. When Freud and Jung arrived in the 20th century, they stripped the demonic of wings and gave it new names. The ID, the shadow, the unconscious. Jung warned that what we do not integrate becomes externalized as the devil. To him, possession was projection. The parts of ourselves we deny become the monsters we see outside. Religions called it sin. Psychology calls it repression. Both agree that denial breeds darkness. Across every culture and creed, one truth echoes. A distracted mind invites influence. Whether that influence is labeled demon, energy, or ideology depends on the age. But the mechanism is constant. Loss of self-awareness opens the door. The spiritual battlefield is not in some distant realm of fire and shadow. It is inside human consciousness. Every unexamined fear, every unhealed wound is a gate, and every act of awareness is a seal upon it. When shamans burned sage, they purified the air. When monks chanted, they synchronized breath and heart rate. When believers prayed, they focused thought. Each practice, though wrapped in myth, contained real neuropsychological power. Modern science now proves what faith once practiced intuitively. Focused attention alters brainwaves. Belief changes biochemistry. Intention rewires perception. So perhaps the ancients were not primitive after all. They simply spoke in symbols what we now measure in scans. The war between light and darkness may have never been external. It is the echo of every inner struggle, between impulse and conscience, fear and reason, despair and meaning. The demons may wear many masks, supernatural, political, or digital, but they all seek the same prize, the throne of the human mind. And every age, whether ancient or modern, writes its own version of the exorcism.